thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Join us as we dive into the deep end of the unexplainable and try to piece together what happened. You are listening to Locations Unknown.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Locations Unknown. Wherever you are, thank you for tuning in. I am your co-host Mike, and as always, I'm here with Joe.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. We got a couple updates. We had some, we actually sold out of our hats and merchandise on the website, which is pretty cool. Just got some more in. We also have some bumper stickers available, so please visit us on Facebook, check out the store, help us support the show. This episode is brought to you by Verger. The health benefits of CBD have been known for quite some time. Verger offers only the highest quality raw flower, edibles, oils, skincare line, and various other CBD products. You can find them on Facebook or on their website at vergermed.com. That's VERDUREMED.com.
Okay, everybody, let's gear up and get out to explore Locations Unknown. The date is October 18th, 1984. 3.5-year-old Laura Bradbury was on a camping trip with her family at the Indian Cove Campground in Joshua Tree National Park. Joshua Tree served as a nice break for the family of 5 that lived nearby in a cramped 2-bedroom condominium. Laura and her 8-year-old brother Travis went to the restroom. While Travis used the restroom, Laura waited outside for her brother to return. When Travis came out, Laura had vanished. On this week's episode, we will cover the timeline and details that led up to Laura's disappearance, the bizarre events that unfolded during the search, and the shocking murders that opened the door to a potential conspiracy and cover-up. Joshua Tree National Park is located in Southern California. If you've listened to episode 1 of the podcast, we already went through a pretty detailed description of the park, so we're not going to do that again here. We are going to go into a more detailed description of where Laura went missing, which is the Indian Cove Campground. So this is information right off the National Park's website.
Yeah, I think if you want to know about Joshua Tree, they should probably listen to our other episode, right?
Yeah, we had a great episode where we actually talked to George Land, the PIO from the park. He went into kind of a lot of the details of the geography. And
Yep, so finish this episode up, go right over to that other episode, and then when you're done with that one, listen to all the other ones too.
So, as we said, Laura went missing in Indian Cove Campground, which lies amid some huge steep rock formations, which Joshua Tree National Park is known for. Because of the proximity to many rock climbing routes, it is a popular camping location for climbers. Indian Cove is one of 4 campgrounds in the park that can be reserved during the busy winter season. It is open on a first-come, first-served basis from June 1st to September 29th. And I always hated these kinds of campsites because you have a list of really cool places you want to hike, and unless you're on their website, the first hour it goes on, to the general public, you're never going to get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, it's a first-come, first-served basis from June 1st through September 29th. Travelers who enjoy warm, dry winters flock to Joshua Tree from October through May, when temperatures hover between 70 and 90 degrees during the day and drop to 40 to 60 degrees at night.
So this is like super popular for people from the north.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine like everybody's trying to get there.
Joshua
during the winter
Tree
months.
is on my list. I've never been there. So hopefully in the next couple of years.
Although with all the people that go missing there, maybe not.
Maybe not. No, I still want to go. Summer is the park's off-season due to the uncomfortably high desert heat, and Indian Cove is at an elevation of 3,200 feet. So elevation is not going to be an issue for anyone.
Yeah, it just sounds like it's a large campground that you really can't see all the campsites because of all the rock formations, and it's super popular for people to go climbing. So I'm guessing.
Is this a drive-up campground?
Yeah,
it is.
Like there's RV hookups in some of the spots. Some of them, like I would say like you're more not your everyday backcountry hiker, but like your camper. So like there's some areas for RVs to go. There's some flat areas to pitch tents.
It sounds like a campground. Usually on our trips,
like a state park.
Like the first night we'll stay at a campground like this. We've been driving all day or flying all day, so we kind of stay there. And
you can just pitch a tent next to your car.
Yep.
At like they have those wood base areas where they have spots for your tents and like a bin for fire, a picnic table.
Yep.
Some of them even have electricity.
Showers.
There's obviously there's restrooms. I don't know if they had showers, but there are restrooms. I'm guessing they have showers because it's super popular and right off the road.
And usually a lot of these campgrounds, too, are kind of the starting point for a lot of the trails in the park.
Sure.
So,
yeah, and I mean, in this one, we talked about in the last one, I'm not going to get too much into it so that people listen. But there's not a lot of long trails because it's desert, and you don't want to spend a ton of time in the desert. So I can imagine this is super popular for people. Just do some car camping, do quick day trips to different trails, or if you're a rock climber, from what it looked like in the images, we'll have a couple on the site. There's a ton of rock climbing routes right in the camping area. So I mean, you can wake up and climb, and then you're right there. You don't have to like travel to go do it.
Excellent. Well, that's a location profile of the campground area that Laura went missing in. Joe now is going to go through a character profile of Laura.
So we don't have a ton of information on Laura. She was 3.5 years old. She had blonde hair, blue eyes. So we're going to have some pictures of her. I would say her height, weight is irrelevant and things like that because she's a toddler, and it's not like she's backcountry camping. So I think a lot of times that stuff can play into if you went missing on a 4-day backcountry hike, how tall you are, how big you are, what are the predators in the area.
Yeah.
She was in a heavily populated campground with her family. She's 3.5 years old at the time of the disappearance. This is still unsolved, so she would be about 38 years old now. If nothing happened, and I'm not going to get too deep in it, she'd be in her late 30s right now. October 18th, 1984 was the date of her disappearance. She was going to the bathrooms with her brother. Her brother had to use the restroom. She just kind of followed along. The start of the story begins when he came out of the bathroom. She was just gone. In a big campground with the parents there, the search began immediately. I mean, initially it's parents looking around. They have a large family, so they're all looking around for her. So this is a very short window in a very populated area. So that's what makes this kind of crazy is there's a lot of people around that could have seen things if something shady went down.
Did they say how long the brother was in the bathroom for?
No, but here's my speculation. Little kid at a campground, he's not going to be playing in the restroom.
No.
They're probably doing a lot of fun
probably
stuff.
Like a minute tops.
Yeah, he probably went in to go number one and then came out and she was gone. So my guess is, we'll get into some theories later, but whatever happened immediately. Mm-hmm. And how fast can a 3.5-year-old move? They can get pretty far, but it's a very populated campground.
Yeah.
If there's a little kid running around by themselves,
Yep.
people will notice. So that is the 18th. So the search begins immediately. They don't have the exact times, but basically from the 19th through the 22nd. So from the start of then, they're starting to coordinate things. By the next day, they have 250 searchers with horses, dogs, helicopters that are spread out throughout Joshua Tree. At that point, it was National Monument. So it's a national park now, but it still wasn't officially a park. Now we're going to introduce Mike Bradbury. Mike is Laura's father. He actually accompanied a bloodhound that followed what was believed to be tracks from Laura's flip-flops for almost 2 miles before the dog lost a scent. So they actually had a scent that they were following. And so flip-flops that were her size that they followed for 2 miles.
So do they speculate that she actually walked for 2 miles?
See, that's they don't mention that, but that's where you have, we've talked many times about the power of the dog's nose in this episode and how there's a lot of cases where they're finding people, they can follow scents for miles and find people in remote areas. Yeah, even through water and things like that. The police gave the dog the scent of Laura from an article of clothing or whatever, and they followed flip-flops that were her size for 2 miles. So that's pretty crazy. That means there was somebody small that went for 2 miles with tiny flip-flops.
That's,
So that's, again, you think,
in the desert.
In the desert.
Yeah.
So that's, And
Odd.
I really wish they would have described if it was like kind of a straight line, or because like a 3-year-old's going to meander.
Yep.
But then you also get into, of my experience with my kids, they would be all terrified to leave us too far. You know, they'll push their limits a little bit, but they get freaked out if they're gone for too long and lose sight of me or my wife. At the end of the 22nd, it's been 3 days after she vanished, the county sheriff department called off the wide-scale search. And this is very typical because they basically keep a large search going for the amount of time that's possible to survive on your own. So it sounds kind of morbid, but it also doesn't mean that they stop searching entirely. They can't have 200 people out in the desert forever.
Well, and when we were talking to George, the PIO from Joshua Tree, he said they will set up training exercises in areas where people go missing.
Correct.
Just in case they turn up something while they're training. So it's a way for them to kind of keep searching for items of a missing person or their remains, even after the official search is over.
Correct. So during this point, so they stopped the search and they didn't find anything. So they called off the wide-scale search, but they're still running investigations. The local police are still questioning people. Like I said, there's a ton of witnesses because the campground is usually so full. So multiple witness interviews pointed to the sightings of a suspect. It was a man in his 50s in a metallic blue van that was spotted at Indian Cove shortly before she disappeared. And investigators speculated to the press that he was taking a back road to Big Bear, and the man was described as a potbelly, bearded man. So that was it. And they didn't, basically through their investigation, they didn't put too much, credence into it. They thought maybe it was just a guy traveling. There are a lot of people around. I'm sure he looked shady. So they had thousands of tips coming in. They can't take all of them. So they have to see how much evidence they can get and how they're spending their time. So desperate for any answers, the sheriff's department even brought in hypnotists to try and get more information about the man from the witnesses, and nothing turned up. So they were passionate about this.
They were trying everything.
They were trying everything, and I think that's important to say because I think some people look at, when I first read, I'm like, well, that's weird. But I also look at it as they may have taken this so personally, they're turning up nothing.
Yeah.
And I could imagine how frustrating that is. At that point, you throw your hands up and just say, what the hell else can we do? You know what? Let's bring in a hypnotist and see if there's some subconscious thing we can get out of some of these people. And they still got nothing.
Wow.
So Mike, the father, started losing faith in the deputies handling the case. So I'm guessing too, you have, father and mother freaking out.
Yeah.
They have a big family. They have a lot of kids. They probably love kids. They have their 3.5-year-old goes missing. That'd be devastating. So they're freaking out. They're probably questioning the sheriffs. That's adding stress to the sheriff's team. So in interviews he's giving to the press too, which would not help the situation, would complicate it, he was calling them incompetent and lazy for not doing something. So you have a mix of these guys I think are trying their best. You have this father who's devastated, who's starting to point fingers, and he's looking for answers, essentially.
Yeah.
So
That's
he's
helpful, though, I imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, you're dealing with people and emotions. So if you have a sheriff's deputy that's actually trying very hard and now he's being called incompetent, he's going to get
Probably
defensive.
a lot of those guys have young kids too.
Sure.
I mean, they're all trying their hardest
to
find this girl.
It sounded like it was just kind of like a crap show. I mean, it's just of emotion and people running around.
Yeah.
He even speculated at one point there'd be a cover-up because someone inside the department knew the kidnapper. So he's thinking there's a kidnapper and they couldn't get information and someone's covering it up.
Yeah.
So that's also where you start going back to father-mother intuition stuff. Like, how did he come to that conclusion so fast? I mean, it's been only a few days, and he's doing these interviews within weeks of that happening. From his perspective, he started growing tired of what he thought was the incompetence of the authorities. The Bradburys mobilized their own massive effort to find Laura. So they are distributing millions of flyers. They had T-shirts with her picture printed on them and distributed them. They appeared on multiple radio and television talk shows to muster support for their effort. The disappearance was even recreated twice on national television. So they actually reenacted and kind of went through like what could have happened with the help of national TV. So it became a huge story.
Yeah.
They established a hotline to gather tips on their own and other field inquiries. And Laura was one of the first missing children to be featured on milk cartons. So that's when they started doing the missing kids. So, I mean, her image was blasted everywhere. So it became a huge national story. In comes, I'd say, one of the first twists of the case where you'd think it would end up being a break. So of all the tips and the questions that came in, there were 2 individuals who claimed to have solid information on who kidnapped Laura. So you had 2 people come in and say, we know who did it, essentially. It was Clifford LaVille and Toby Santiangelo. They were questioned, and their stories were checked out by local authorities. After the investigation, the official word was that the tips and the info were not credible at all, and this by itself would not have been a huge deal. I think, there's a ton of people that will... You have those people that will try and gain notoriety for themselves. They're a little off in the head that just want to be involved in stuff.
So
I'm sure
they fake tips.
Exactly. So it initially comes off as maybe these were just a little goofy people that wanted to get some fame and are taking advantage of a situation. Shortly after reporting what they believed to be good details about who kidnapped Laura, both Clifford and Toby were found shot to death.
Wow.
So I think that is like...
That's
one hell of a coincidence. Exactly. And I think when you get to a coincidence that's crazy, you're not in a coincidence anymore.
Yeah.
This is a clipping from the October 18th, 1985 in the San Bernardino Sun. Bolin, who works at the Morongo Basin Sheriff Station east of Indian Cove, said a deputy was scheduled to visit the picnic ground at 4 p.m. Thursday to kick off a 4-day patrol. It is the latest development in a year-long investigation in the case, which brought newfound notoriety on the plight of missing children. So this is the case of Laura, essentially, they're talking about. Mm-hmm. Joshua Tree National Monument, a desert and mountain wilderness, has been searched before for clues to Laura's disappearance. Search and rescue teams have visited the site several times during training exercises and to explore theories. So this is, again, hearken to what you said, that they never really stop searching for people.
No.
They're going to keep going, and they run their training exercises there. So they ran exercises to explore theories on where Laura might be. On the slim possibility her body is still there, Bolin said. Investigators have gone back up there time and time again, said Bolin. In January, dogs trained to sniff out bodies were brought in, but they found nothing. The search for Laura also has produced some startling side investigations that continue today. For example, the bodies of a pioneer town couple, Clifford LaVille, 42, and Toby Ann Santiago, 22, were found in July and August at Sunfair Dry Lake, about 6 miles from where Laura was last seen. They have been reported missing in April, 2 months after they gave detectives the name of a potential suspect in the Bradbury case. Lieutenant Dean Nadler, a task force investigator, said the couple's tip was just a feeling on their part and nothing concrete. So you have conflicting statements where this couple says, we have concrete evidence.
Yeah.
They get murdered. Questions start getting rose again about like, wow, that seems like a coincidence.
Yeah.
And the authorities' official response is they had just a feeling and it was nothing concrete. So this is again where you start seeing, all right, there's some weird red flags going on that are a little beyond a consequence. So now we're going to fast forward to 1986. So roughly a year later, a skull believed to be that of Laura Bradbury was found by hikers near the park's west entrance, only 2 miles from the family's campsite. Some reports say 5 miles, so there's a little inconclusiveness there, but it was within a 5-mile radius, we'll say. Pretty dang close. However, DNA tests were unable to conclusively prove that the skull was Laura's, not even blood type or gender, and only certainty was that it was a child. So at that time, they didn't have the DNA stuff to really do a good match.
But
I mean, they knew it was a kid's skull, and it's a person's skull. Like it's. I think initially you kind of blow it off like, oh, it could be anybody, and you're like, wait, it could be anybody. Like, what kid died out there then if it's not Laura?
Right. Yeah. I know they can't conclusively say that it's Laura based on DNA, but you've got to think Laura went missing a year ago. Who else is
missing their kid? That didn't talk about it, or like so that's where it's. I remember I felt kind of bad even after reading, like, oh, it could be anyone. Like I was going to blow it off. Then I realized, wait, no, that's a kid's skull. Yeah. Like that's a person. It's not just like an animal skull you found laying around.
Yep.
So a sheriff captain actually did publicly speculate that it was Laura's and had his own theory. He said maybe she meandered away from the toilet, stumbled, and was somehow buried by collapsing sand.
Huh.
So that's... has it happened before? I don't know where you come up with that.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of like, okay, why would he say that? That's kind of a weird theory, I guess, versus she's 3. She wandered off in the desert and died of exhaustion or exposure.
Yeah.
That's very specific. She fell and got covered in sand. That just seems very, very odd. Only recently, he continued, coyotes or mountain lions had dug it all up, and that's how they found it. So that's his theory, is she got lost,
Covered by
sand, and a year or 2 years later now, coyotes or mountain lions dug it up for some reason after 2 years. It seems a little odd. So now we're going to, and this is why I like this story. It seems like it's about to die out, and then every couple of years something weird happens that goes into it. So I can imagine that the parents were just losing their minds, and not only not getting closure, but then constantly, maybe when they're ready to really settle out of the fact that their daughter is missing and probably dead, but they don't know, something happens to reignite and reinvigorate the investigation, and then ends up leaving them more confused. So now we're in December of 1988, and this is where the story takes yet another twist. So we're going to go to San Diego County to an Alan Michael Stevens. He's held on a $250,000 bail as a suspect in a string of murders within San Diego County. This particular instance is based on a strangulation of a woman whose body was found in North County, and the San Diego County District Attorney's Office said authorities are continuing to review his past to see if he might be involved in 36 similar slayings. So they think this guy's a serial killer.
Yeah.
So that's why he's got a high bail. He actually tried lowering the bail. They denied it. So he spent some time in jail while they investigated because they felt strongly he was involved in a lot of murders.
Yeah.
So they're thinking we're dealing with a serial killer. Now, this is completely separate from Joshua Tree. But outside the courtroom, Charles Rogers, which is a deputy district attorney who's working with the Metropolitan Homicide Task Force, said that a group will study Stevens' activities over the past 3 years to determine whether there's any connection between him and the murders of 39 other women.
Wow.
So they have this string of cases that are unsolved that are similar in strangulation that they feel like he might be connected to. So now we're going to go back down to San Bernardino County. Stevens was one of thousands of people questioned in the case after Laura vanished in 1984 while she was camping with her parents. Stottle acknowledged that Stevens' name also has been linked with 2 other unsolved crimes tenuously associated with the Bradbury case. So Stottle said Stevens was an acquaintance of Clifford and Toby, whose bodies were found near the 29 Palms in 1985. So he was an acquaintance of the people who got murdered.
Yeah.
Who gave what they said was a credible tip on the disappearance. So you have a potential serial killer who knows 2 people that got murdered, directly connected with the case, that had information on who did it.
Girl. Yeah.
Now Stottle continues, this is the sheriff. There was street talk that those 2, now this is Clifford and Toby, had some information about Laura Bradbury case, Stottle said, but they never officially came to us, and as far as I know, it was just street talk. So now you went from they claim to have information.
Yeah.
The sheriff's department acknowledged that they talked to them and deemed that it wasn't credible.
Yep.
Now fast forward only a few years, they're saying that they never came forward and talked to the sheriff's department at all.
Huh.
They're saying it was like a word on the street that they heard.
Yeah.
So the story is like they're slowly distancing themselves from these 2 people who came forward saying they know who did it, that got murdered. Stottle said it was not unusual that Stevens would have known the murdered couple because everybody knows just about everybody in the small community like Joshua Tree. I don't know about that. I don't know how small it is, but
yeah,
okay.
I don't either.
Alan's personal description, so this kind of gives it away, and this is based off of even what you said in the beginning about the description of who the multiple witnesses said who it was in the van. 300-pound former biker with scraggly beard. So, like, it's the exact description of what multiple witnesses said was a shady dude in a van right when she disappeared.
Yep.
So, Stottle said we questioned him, this is Stevens, in December of 1984 and January of 1985 because he lived in a van in the community of Joshua Tree.
Interesting.
So, like, if anyone's putting this together, it's like you question this guy twice, so he's obviously weird enough that he's an ongoing suspect.
Yep.
Now he's a suspect in a string of murders. He matches the description of multiple witnesses, lived in a van at the time, and they just keep writing this off as, it's not him.
Yeah.
It seems like it's him. So, and he finishes his statement, and this is in the newspaper, we are confident then and are confident now that he had no connection to Laura Bradbury's disappearance. That's like the only credible connection that exists from what I've seen. I've like looked deep into this. I even looked in that separate guy's history and all of his other ongoings.
Yeah.
He's like a career criminal and probably a murderer.
Yeah.
And they are like just acting like, nope, it can't be. It's not him. So who knows? So now we're going to fast forward to 1990. So we're getting more recent now. New DNA tests were said to prove that the skull was Laura's with a 99% likelihood match. So now with new DNA testing, they're fairly certain to a 99% degree. So that's Laura's skull. Yeah. It's done. So 2001, unfortunately, Patty, this is Laura's mother, she passed away. And that's only brought up because they never stopped looking for it. And if I can even go back to the case in Rocky Mountain National Park, remember the parents gave up in 5 days?
Yeah.
These parents, I mean, she went to the grave, never giving up. This is like how I would be. I would never give up. And this is proof positive, and that's why I thought those parents did it. So back to this one. So now we're in 2010. Michael, her father, actually wrote a book about the disappearance called Laura Bradbury, A Father's Search. In an interview, he said he was shown about a 40 color, 35 millimeter slides of the skull and was astonished to find out it was a full-size skull, about 7 inches by 5 inches, missing teeth and a lower jaw. He claimed that investigators showed him a much different skull shortly after the hikers discovered the remains. So basically, he was shown the skull when they discovered it, and he was trying to get it transferred because he couldn't even get a death certificate for his daughter because they couldn't determine it was her. And then when they finally did the test, they showed him 40 pictures, and he said it was a completely different skull, entirely different, and he's having trouble getting, he wants it. Yeah. If it's his dead daughter, he wants it. Yeah. Like it's his kid. So he's obviously still broken up about this. So Mike is quoted as saying, "My wife and I were shown a smaller 3-inch skull cap in or around the 1986-87 timeframe that the sheriff's claim was Laura's skull. He said the two skulls are totally dissimilar. They look nothing like each other. I wonder now what or whose skull they showed me then and why." He also had a report on tests that provided inconclusive results on whether the cranium was his daughter's. According to the report, only 1 of 4 DNA tests performed on the skull matched DNA samples from Laura's mother's blood. Even hair taken from Laura's hairbrush did not match DNA with the skull, he said. The 2 partial skull bones are the only remains Michael was aware of that are believed to be from his daughter. "I am very anxious to put closure to this terrible period of my life," Bradbury said. "All I want is justice for my daughter. That's all I care about. So no arrests have ever been made, and the case remains unsolved." So this one's insane. Yeah, I mean, it's
this one is, a little different from some of the other cases we've looked at where there is, quite a big possibility of actually human involvement in the disappearance.
I think it was totally abduction.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of our other cases, there's always a big chance of something in the wild happening to the person. But I guess before we go into our theories, do you want to recap what some of the official theories were?
Yeah, so I mean, well, we have the first official theory that is written down was after they discovered the skull. Yeah. I'll go back a little bit further. I think everyone seemed to get on board that she was abducted. Yep. I think that's what everyone thought. And maybe there's a few people that thought maybe she wandered off and got lost, but I think the ongoing thing was she was abducted. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone through such a massive effort post-search. Yeah. And that's simply because, again, you're in the desert. It's not raining. Not a lot changes. Yeah. They do a wide-scale search immediately after she goes missing, can't find her. That's pretty crazy. So then you get to the next official theory where they find the skull a couple years later. And the first official theory is she wandered and got buried in sand, which I just say is bull because you had the bloodhound following the footprints. Does she get completely buried in sand within 1 day? It's a matter of, I don't know. I just feel like they would have found something, especially the dogs then. Yeah. They would have smelled that.
Well, the one thing, while I agree, I think abduction is the most likely scenario, I'm still having a hard part figuring out how they were able to track her scent for 2 miles. And basically that means that she was walking on her own power for 2 miles. We don't know if it's down a trail or just through the desert.
I couldn't get a report if there were adult footprints. With her footprints, there was tire tracks where the trail ended.
Yeah. I'm assuming if there were adult footprints, that would have been a pretty big. I mean,
it would have been mentioned.
They would have been mentioned.
It was
by
a
the family
little
or-
girl flip flops and boots for this
So-
amount of time, and then tire tracks pulling away from where they disappeared.
I'm
Something like that.
gonna go down that route first, just because I don't think this is the likely scenario of what happened to her.
I think tease it out so I can hear it.
Yeah, I still obviously the dogs smelled her scent for 2 miles somewhere through the park, and being that she's 3.5-year-old toddler, prime target for a mountain lion or a coyote, and maybe one possibility is she did wander off, like some people have said, and she waddled down this trail for 2 miles, and a mountain lion or some type of animal out in the park grabbed her, maybe didn't kill her,
Carried her
on
off?
the site, but carried
Okay.
her off. I'm assuming a mountain lion's probably strong enough to carry a
Oh yeah,
3.5-year-old
absolutely.
toddler
I mean, you
away.
think about the things they carry. I mean, they can carry big animals. That would be very easy for a cat to carry off.
And I mean, so maybe there wasn't any human involvement in this. Maybe it really is a case of she wandered off, a mountain lion attacked her, and then dragged her away to the mountain lion's den or wherever it lived.
Okay.
And maybe that was outside of the search radius, because maybe the searchers thought 3.5-year-old kid is not gonna be able to walk farther than 2 miles in the hot desert sun.
Well, and they're using helicopters and stuff too.
And helicopters.
You'd be able to see.
And
they're flying.
I'm only saying too, because when we talked to George, he mentioned that when they get flash flooding there, it can wash away all kinds of stuff and move stuff, downstream all over the park. So what I'm thinking, maybe, little girl wanders off into the park 2 miles, gets attacked by a mountain lion, dragged to the mountain lion's den, farther away, and then the remains get dispersed during some heavy weather in the park, and that's how the skull was found so far away by a park entrance, is because it was dispersed by, all the
Yeah,
flash flooding.
it'd be interesting to do a study of where the skull was found, if it is like in a downstream section
Yeah.
from another part of the park where they speculate she could have walked. So this is a good theory. I didn't think of this.
And I mean, if you think
I think
about,
this is a really good theory,
you
actually.
think about a mountain lion maybe attacking someone. I go back to looking at those nature documentaries where they'll go for like the throat,
Sure.
but they're not gonna consume somebody on site, so there might not be a lot of sign of blood or anything right there. I mean, that'll happen later where the mountain lion takes the person to.
Yeah, as disturbing as it is to think about, like,
I know,
it's
yeah,
possible.
this is terrible to think about.
It's terrible to think about, but I think legitimately to hash out what happened, it's possible a mountain lion, she's very tiny,
Yep.
grab her, and they can just run. I mean, like one bite and run, there could be very even little blood. You'd think
That's what I'm
like if
thinking.
it's like
Usually
they pounce, grab, and then they run off to a safer spot to actually finish the job. And again, like I'm like
And it could
getting
be-
like gross feelings even imagining
it
something
could
like
be several
witnessing that, how
miles.
disgusting it would be. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you think about they can snatch and run, so there might not be blood evidence. Like it could legitimately be she walked, and that's where it happened.
Yeah, and it could be outside of the search zone, just because the searchers, they were thinking a 3.5-year-old little girl on foot isn't going to get very far. They're going to search this one probably couple square miles and thoroughly.
Sure.
And who knows? Maybe the mountain lion, like I said, had a den. I don't know where they live, but maybe they went underground, and that's why helicopters didn't find any sign of her. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, you would assume they bring them to some kind, because they're going to look for shade.
Yep.
So under a rock, under
Tree.
things, and that's where they're hanging out.
And then, like I said earlier, George mentioned that this is very common, and this helps them and sometimes hurts them in search and rescues, is when they get their torrential rains and flash flooding in the park, it literally washes everything away.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it helps them when they're looking for somebody's remains, because it will wash stuff downstream and out in the open, and then they see it. Other times it can just totally disturb the remains of somebody and disperse everything to the point where you may not find their, anything from them anymore.
Yeah, so the theory in your mind is she's probably under a rock the whole time, and some flooding may have actually kicked out the skull because it's a larger bone. Like it could have actually got picked up by the flow and then moved, and then was half buried somewhere, and they thought maybe they weren't thinking at that time, like, oh, that's where it happened. versus no, this is where the remains ended up.
If we're to believe local law enforcement and that guy is not responsible for her abduction, I would say this would be the most likely cause of her disappearance and death.
Okay.
If you trust law enforcement. Now,
Sure.
I'm not saying, I still believe, even after saying that this could be a mountain lion attack, I still think the fact that she was in a very populated campground and this guy has a known criminal history, like you said, and these two other people were shot dead.
I think your
and
theory
dumped in the park. I think maybe this girl was, and the other thing is this girl and her family were frequent visitors to the campground and the park. Maybe this guy.
Oh, so he lives, and I see where you're getting at.
Maybe he's been kind of, following this girl for a while now and this family.
And sick people do that.
They do that.
They
stalk and then they figure out a time when they're going to attack and abduct the person. So maybe this guy had been following the family for several weeks or several months.
Well, and it's sad because, you mentioned it in the beginning, they're in a cramped apartment, so they frequently visited the park.
Yeah.
So let's believe what they said of Joshua Tree's community is small at that time.
Yeah.
So this guy lives right there. And this big family, which would be noticeable. My family's very noticeable when I come out because we're 8 people.
Yeah.
So if we pull up to a campsite, it's like, holy crap, look at that, look at all those people.
Yeah.
So if they're regularly going there, they probably know a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
If it is the small community, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
So this guy would be well aware of that family and that little girl and is potentially just waiting for an opportunity. And this is where, honestly, the whole time you're telling me your theory, I'm like, that makes, if there were no other things that happened, that's what happened. Like, that was very convincing to me, except for, like you said, all these other things. She disappeared at the most opportune time possible, which would scream human kidnapping because she's in a populated area. So a mountain lion didn't get her at the bathroom.
I just can't get over that 2-mile track the bloodhounds were on, though. That still, even with the kidnapping, I still can't reconcile that.
Well, and that's where it's like, I'd love to know, did she walk off with the guy?
Yeah.
And they walked for a while first, like, because maybe he was smart enough to know, if I just grab this little kid here, she'll start screaming, everyone's here. So did he, like, I have candy, I coaxed her along.
Yeah, do you want to come walk with me for a while? Who knows?
Yeah. So, I mean, or is it possible the dogs didn't get the scent right? I mean, I don't think that's a high likelihood, but I would say anything's got to be possible at this point. So I think the initial official theory is just garbage. The lost, buried in sand. I think that's garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously it's very easy to see a toddler wandering off into a desert and dying from exposure. That to me is not.
I would almost say
outlandish.
Dying of exposure, covered by sand over a longer period of time. Sure.
Yeah.
But tripped, then buried as a result.
Yeah,
I don't
understand that explanation
I don't think that's
of it.
I don't think that's it. So then, you get into, they're interviewing all these people. This guy, everyone there thinks this guy is shady.
Yep.
And then he's not there anymore after this occurs. They question him twice on it. Then, and this is again what throws me off and makes me scream conspiracy, is you have these 2 witnesses that come forward that claim we have solid evidence. The word stated that I heard that was quoted from them was solid evidence on who kidnapped.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even speculating on who could have, and it might be. It was, we have solid evidence on who kidnapped. So like they knew it.
Yep.
They give testimony. The cops write it off as nothing. Then they get murdered 2 months later.
Yeah.
In the same area. The next time that case is revisited, they basically talk about how it's street talk and these people never actually came forward to the police.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're denying they came forward earlier. That doesn't make sense.
It seemed very well documented that they were interviewed and they came forward with solid evidence because it was reported in the newspaper right when it happened. So you had the newspaper from when they were interviewed and they had spoke to the news about it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's already above quote-unquote street talk.
Yeah.
It's documented. They spoke to the news, essentially, and said we spoke to authorities, and authorities acknowledged that they spoke to them.
Yeah.
Then those same authorities only a few years later said they never spoke to them.
Yeah, that's bizarre. The only thing I can think of is whoever they talked to maybe wasn't familiar with the case and just didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Why would you deny that? I mean...
Or say something publicly and not know it for certain.
Yeah.
So,
well, it definitely seems that at the time, local law enforcement kind of bungled the investigation. I mean, there seems to be a lot of dots you can connect, and they weren't connecting them. Now, I mean, I don't understand that, this description of the guy was in the van, at the time of her disappearance. Multiple people described the same type of, guy. I think we can definitely say that the local police at this time kind of fumbled the investigation a bit.
And I think that's where you're getting to Mike thought that they were incompetent.
There's a lot of dots. I think
he was saying that relatively quickly after they started things. So maybe he was seeing things that were like, what the heck's going on
there's
here?
There's a lot of dots you can connect, and they weren't connecting them. And then you have the case of the wrong skull being shown to them later on.
Yeah. So again, they have
is that just incompetence? They grabbed the wrong skull out of evidence.
Well, and they talk about how he was trying to get the remains transferred for a long time, and he's getting stonewalled, which this isn't a major case or like a political figure or something that they're still investigating.
Yeah.
This is a guy who they're kind of done with, as far as they're concerned, they're kind of done with this case. And he can't get it transferred for some reason. Yeah. So you have, this is only a short period of time. I mean, this was 38 years ago.
Yep.
You probably have the same people working at the department that were involved in there. Are they stonewalling this stuff because they know they lost a skull? Or again, there's speculation that he, like I said, and this is where it's a weird, either obsessed father or intuition. Yeah. One of his first things was he thought someone in the department was covering it up because they knew the kidnapper. So is it possible that they found the skull? Yeah. The skull was placed near the entrance as a way to bring closure, because the sheriff's deputy immediately speculated, yep, this is her. Yeah. But DNA couldn't prove it. So you have maybe they're hoping the father and mother just accept it and now it's closure. They said, no, now you get to a point in period of time where you can do DNA testing. Yeah. And there's a verification of some sort. It seems like there's some confusion around how the tests were run. He's shown pictures only. He can't see the skull. And he says immediately it's different. Yeah. So is this evidence tampering now because there truly is a cover-up and the officer involved in the case actually is doing something and these parents will not let it go. And he has to keep slowly stepping, covering his tracks as they go through this and as they keep demanding the skull get released and things like that.
Yeah, I guess as far as the investigation goes, I kind of lean maybe less conspiracy and more just incompetence. Okay. I think maybe they just ran a poor investigation and they, the incompetence.
Do you think maybe it was incompetence cover up?
Maybe they were trying to cover up, a bad image. I just can't think of a motivation to, shield somebody that killed a child from, being brought to justice. I just can't picture any law enforcement going that far. I mean, maybe there's a reason why. I
couldn't find any familial connection to this Alan and anyone in the department, because that's the only thing I could initially think of was maybe it's like a cousin.
The only thing I could think of is, some Training Day movie kind of plot where they have some type of, drug ring going on, and this guy makes them a lot of money, so they don't want him to go to jail. They want to keep him in place so they can, keep
I didn't think about that. If he's a known criminal and he's running some sort of enterprise, I think
that's going down. There's absolutely no evidence of.
There's no evidence, but I don't think it's also not. It's not impossible. No, it has happened.
Not impossible. I think for me, the two most likely scenarios are the first one I said, where maybe she really did wander off because the bloodhounds did track her for 2 miles and she got attacked by a mountain lion. The mountain lion dragged her off, quite a ways away out of the search zone. And then over the course of the next year, a lot of the torrential rains and flash floods, they get washed, one of the bigger pieces of her remains, out by the entrance to the park where it was found. I think that's a possibility. I think maybe the second possibility, like we said, is this guy kind of followed the family for a while and was planning to abduct this girl. He abducted her, and then, the investigation that ensued was just, bungled, and, the people involved were just incompetent, and they didn't do all the basic, connecting the dots. They interviewed people, and, we had those two
small town sheriff's department just not
they're not
equipped to handle this style. This was the
magnitude
of this case.
Murder investigation that they've ever had, and maybe they, who knows?
That wasn't like a clear cut.
Yeah,
like something
where it
that
actually
just had a
requires a lot of detective work.
Yeah, like it has a lot of questions, and it's not like, oh, their boyfriend and girlfriend were fighting, girlfriend found dead, boyfriend ran away.
I mean, if I'm an investigator and multiple people say this guy who lives in the campground area, drives a van, was at the scene when the girl went missing, two acquaintances that he knew had said, yeah, we know, some information, then they show up dead, I would be probably arresting him. I mean, that's
the biggest thing too. I could not read anywhere what their description was of the person who they said did it.
Yeah.
So everything I found in newspapers and the reports I found were that they had solid evidence on who did it, but I couldn't find the information on what they said or who did it anywhere.
Well, and so these two people that were killed were also dumped in the park where he lives. So, I mean...
Yeah, like within the air. I mean...
If I was an investigator, I think I'd have enough, circumstantial evidence...
Yeah.
To maybe bring him in on the charge of maybe possibly abducting and killing this
motive
girl.
If their testimony described him.
Yeah.
So to not have them actually speak in court.
I think maybe the investigation totally screwed up this aspect of it. And then when the family tried to get the skull, I think it was probably more incompetence. They literally showed them the wrong skull. Or maybe the skull from the child was destroyed. Who knows?
Or in the morgue, they have a bunch of skulls from different things.
Maybe they have a bunch of stuff.
Grabbed the wrong one.
Yeah, who knows? I mean,
that could be possible too. If they're not cataloging evidence very well.
Yeah, and this is back in the 80s. I mean, no.
Yeah, they don't have computers. It's all files.
It's all files, and so I could easily see that happening. So I don't know. I'm more and more that I'm thinking about it, I'm kind of 40-60, 40% mountain lion, 60% abduction by this creepy dude.
Okay, so you're 40-60, natural causes, 60 kidnapping,
murder, incompetent investigation.
Okay. I'm with you on most of I'm going to say 3. I love your mountain lion theory. And if it wasn't for the other stuff, I'd just say that's it. Something like that occurred. Mm-hmm. The one, I'd say there's 2 possibilities. The one you just described, and then the second one would be some sort of...
More of a cover-up.
Just because, again, you have the rule of threes where just things don't work out.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like a ton of very well-placed incompetence.
Yeah.
And that could also be because we're looking at this thing under a microscope of just this one case. Mm-hmm. If we looked at other, is this incompetence rampant in everything they do?
History of incompetence.
Yeah, like if we looked at every case they've ever did, is it very clear that they're incompetent, but other cases are easier and they just work out? Or is this one specifically more incompetence than all the others? Which would then, again, I lean more towards the conspiracy side.
Yeah, and I think we have to also obviously say that maybe truly... there's more evidence that we're not seeing, and the law enforcement officers at the time really came to the conclusion that this guy wasn't involved. I mean, that is technically a possibility too. And
see, but the other officers were investigating serial murders of women around San Diego. So they were not focused on these 2 witness murders or Laura specifically.
Yeah.
Because when it came back to talking about then, in enters the same sheriff that dealt with it originally.
Yeah.
So you have this guy's name popping up for several years, revolving around this, he's inserting himself in this investigation specifically.
Yeah.
So, so I think we have good, solid theories. Do you think? I'd finish it with: do you think that one of the skulls was Laura's? Do you think that was her skull?
I think the original skull found was
so she
hers.
was deceased as a kid. She's not an adult somewhere.
I don't think so.
Locked up.
I think it's very coincidental that this little girl goes missing in the park, and then a year later they find her skull.
Yeah, a human child skull, and it's not
in
hers.
A park. I mean, it's a big deal when children go missing and are killed. And the fact that there were no other disappearances in that area of a child.
Even in the newspaper clippings, you'd say if they were speculating, they could be well, there were 2 other kids that went missing in this area too. It could be one of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
but they never mentioned
we found a small child skull.
Yeah.
This is the only child that's been missing. This has got to be it. And then DNA tests later proved it was.
Yep.
And then did they just show the father the wrong file?
Yeah.
When they had the pictures.
Yeah.
So I think I'm with you on that one. I think she unfortunately did not make it. Fortunately, she's not being tortured somewhere and she's 38 years old
Yeah,
and locked in a basement,
locked in a basement.
or maybe didn't suffer very long. I mean, it's again morbid, but you hope that the suffering was very
short-lived. Is the guy
short-lived.
in the van still alive?
I didn't check. This is my bad.
Yeah, no, I'm assuming he was probably in his 30s,
because I was
40s
even
at the
looking
time.
up information on the officer, and I didn't have enough information to dive in because I was searching his name.
Yeah.
And there was recently stories of corruption in the department with somebody with the same name, if it's not the same guy, about like faking training records and hours to get money.
Oh.
So I would love to see if
At
that's
the same time?
No, like in the last 3 years.
Oh, really?
Because you have to admit, this guy's
So he's still a sheriff.
potentially. I was searching for a while to see if I could connect that this is the same last name or if it's maybe a descendant of them. But I mean, you have officers that work at a department for 50 years.
Yeah.
And they work their way up. This is a recent in regards of this is one generation potentially of officer. So if this guy's doing this stuff too and they're catching him, maybe he is a crooked sheriff potentially. Did not confirm that it's the same last name, same first name. I'd say 90% certain it's the same guy.
But we don't know.
I can't 100% confirm, so I'm not going to say it, even though I kind of just said it. No, but you can look it up on your own. Yeah, look it up on your own. But yeah, they're going through court right now, court hearings on some form of corruption charges right now, and he's got the same name, and he's in the same area, same police department. So I'm like, what are the odds?
Yeah.
So it's probably him. Just couldn't definitively connect the two. So that again, because what I basically did was I want to find out the character of this officer to find out if he is more of a corrupt guy, and that's immediately what popped up were these other charges in court cases. So
yeah.
I'm
assuming
leaning more.
he's no longer an active cop.
He was consulting.
Oh, okay.
So the person was of an age that you could argue fits the timeline, and he wasn't employed full-time on the department. He's retired and consulting. So a lot of times those guys will come back for training purposes and do classes.
Yeah.
When I went through fire academy, it was a bunch of retired firefighters that taught all those courses. Yeah, I'm leaning more towards, I honestly am leaning more towards some sort of cover-up.
You're going the cover-up route?
I am, and I like to think I'm a more reasonable person and wouldn't lean that way, but like I think there's
It's okay, you can do it once in a while.
I know. I just think there's so much here that's screaming conspiracy cover-up.
Yeah.
I just can't connect the two guys. And I think that's the biggest thing, is if there was one more piece that somehow connected Alan and the sheriff, it would be in my mind 100% that thing. So that's the one, and I looked for days. I was Google searching those two names. I was doing a ton of different things to try and see if they pop up anywhere other than just articles discussing this case. Yeah. And I couldn't find it. So, I mean, there's not a lot of data available from that
case.
time. Yeah. I mean, it could be. So, I mean, I am still speculating, but I am leaning towards conspiracy cover-up.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I guess, like I said, I'm, 60-40, 60 abduction by the creepy guy in the van, and then bungled police investigation, 40% mountain lion attack. But yeah, I think the case is kind of, you don't know one way or the other after going through it what, really happened.
Absolutely. So tell us your theories. Let us know what you think. This is one of the crazier cases we've done, so we really want to know what you guys think. Let us know on Facebook, Instagram, whatever you use. Thanks again for tuning in. Special thanks to Verger for sponsoring the episode. They're helping us keep running this thing and upping the production quality as we go. Always like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and buy our hats.
Yes.
Buy our hats, visit the website, and leave no trace.
Yes, leave no trace. All right, guys, we will talk to you again on the next episode.